So welcome back to part 2 of dealing with high ammonia levels in the fancy cylinder tank. We've just arrived. We've drained 100 gallons of water out of the tank in an attempt to try to at least dilute that ammonia level. Now if you'll join us, we're going to start putting the new 100 gallons of water back into the tank. So I've got a container here with 100 gallons of brand new clean salt water. We're going to pump back into the tank, that fancy cylinder tank. We'll use the garden hose and the sump pump, and we'll just pump it up there and across the floor and down to the tank.
Normally, I would take advantage of this every 4-week 100-gallon water change by vacuuming the gravel at the bottom of this 66-inch deep tank. But since I believe part of my ammonia problem is due to a die-off of the microlife in the tank as a result of the medication, I don't want to disrupt my living biological filter by doing such. So today, I'm using my sump pump to pump the old 100 gallons of dirty water directly out of the tank.
And you can see we've just about removed 100 gallons of water out of the system. It's down to my tape mark. So here in a few moments, we'll discontinue pumping water out of the tank.
So with the old 100 gallons of salt water pumped out of the tank, I can now remove the sump pump and begin to coil up the hose and then reposition it so I can use it to pump the new 100 gallons of clean salt water back into the tank.
So previously we discussed an ammonia spike in the fancy cylinder tank. I believe it's the results of medication, the copper medication, which probably killed off all the sponge life that was growing in the tank, as well as the microlife in there. Now what's interesting is we've had an ammonia spike, but absolutely no nitrite. I believe this is simply a bottleneck in the biological process, meaning we didn't affect the bacteria in the tank. We affected some of the life in the tank. We killed off some of that life, and that life in turn is now creating a waste issue or more of a biological issue. So the biological filter, which is well established, is still dealing with it, but for some odd reason it's more than it can at the moment. One of the things that we might have considered was introducing a grunge pad with bacteria in it, or maybe some of that snotty liquid bacteria from Dr. Bob, or maybe even some Fritzon number 9 or something like that. But my concern would be is by doing so, we're just going to more capably be able to convert all that ammonia into nitrite, which in turn I then end up with a nitrite spike. And I'd rather just for the moment let the system naturally deal with the ammonia, because the fish seem to be tolerating it. I'm not wild about it, and that's really what we're here today to do, is try to dilute that level a little bit by doing a 100-gallon water change. So anyhow, we've got the hose perched in the tank, and we've got that other end of it is out here to the van, where there's 100 gallons of brand new clean salt water simply waiting to be pumped into the tank. And now that we've checked and made sure that everything's ready to go, and that the other end of the hose is plugged into the tank, we can go ahead and plug in that water pump and start moving that new water back into the tank. And so, as I mentioned, there's probably a handful of things that one could probably run out and do. My concern, as I mentioned earlier, is turning the resolution of this tank into an Indiana Jones movie, meaning It's one problem to another problem to another problem to another problem, and I really don't want to do that. First of all, this particular tank is my pride and joy, so I would not want to end up in a constant situation where I'm always worrying about it, as well as always having to try to come up with a solution. Again, the problem that I'm dealing with was originally parasites, and through the use of strong medication, I've eliminated that parasite issue. Unfortunately, I've created a little bit of a biological issue for myself. All I'm going to do today is a 100-gallon water change. It's an attempt to dilute that ammonia level. The fish seem to be tolerating it, and over the course of the last 4 days, none of that ammonia has converted to nitrite. So I'm assuming it's just a simple situation where I've overwhelmed the first group of bacteria, and if I can bring that level down, it'll more evenly convert waste into nitrite, as opposed to introducing some biological fix that immediately goes in there and eliminates the ammonia, but all it does is convert it to nitrite. And now I've got a second biological wave that I've got to deal with. So I'm not going to go down that path. Again, all I'm doing is diluting the ammonia level in the tank today with the expectation biologically it'll take care of the balance by itself without any further problems. Now, one of the things that I have done to try to decrease the intensity of the ammonia is I've had the girls who feed the tank on a daily basis for me cut back by about 50% in the amount of food going in. Since we've already got an ammonia issue, I don't need to encourage it or increase it by continuing to dump in an abundance of food, especially since the fish seem to be a little off, although they still seem to also be acting okay, but they don't seem to be as vigorous as far as their feeding, so I don't need an abundance of excess food into the tank. If you notice here, as you watch some of the fish, though, they do cruise around and they're picking here and there at the coral sculpture, so that's always a good sign, is feeding, because once they stop feeding, then you know you've got a problem in the tank. And at this point, as I mentioned, I can see the fish feeding here and there, and so I don't think that I've got a real problem in the tank at the moment. Granted, I do have a high level of ammonia in there, but doesn't seem to be affecting the fish at the moment, other than just a slight decrease in appetite.
He's so widely known in the aquarium industry that newly caught fish ask to be bought by him. He set up aquariums for customers 20 years ago. Those same customers still ask for him by name. He doesn't feed the fish. They bring the ocean's bounty to him. He is only second in line when it comes to making purified water. The guy ahead of him is in the Bible. He is the most interesting fish guy in the world. I don't always make DI water, but when I do, I prefer Spectra Pure. Stay pure, my friends. Receive a $50 LA Fishguys discount on a Spectra Pure Max Cap 90 5-stage RODI water purification system. Just call or go online to spectrapure.com and mention or enter LA Fishguys coupon code LAFMAX50 to receive your LA Fishguys $50 discount. Do you have an aquarium question? Are you looking for aquatic answers? Just key in wetwebmedia.com. Wet Web Media has information on freshwater, marine, brackish, and planted aquariums. Wet Web Media is staffed by the capable Wet Web Media crew. Check today's facts, ask questions, or search keywords. That's wetwebmedia.com.
So we're about 2/3 the way through pumping that 100 gallons into the house, into the cylinder tank, and everything seems to be flowing, no pun intended, smoothly at this point, which is always a good thing.
The tank is about 70 feet away from where my van sits, but my sump pump quite capably moves that water across that horizontal distance. This tank has been running for about 7 years. It was originally filled with synthetic salt water. Up until last fall, its every 4-week 100-gallon water changes were with real ocean water. As of last fall, I switched back over to purified water and synthetic sea salts. I've seen no change between the natural or the manufactured salt water, and I've seen no effect to the fish. All continue to behave as expected. They are fed quite heavily and have grown together inside the tank. Aside from a reoccurring eye flukes issue, I suspect my ick outbreaks are the results of stress. Stress from being in a confined environment. The advantage, though, of a round tank is that you can go in one direction and never reach the other end.
And now that the water is filled up enough that it's just barely beginning to spill into the internal overflow, that'll immediately run down into the wet-dry trickle filter, of which at that point I need to turn the water pump back on.
With the incoming water turned off and the tank's water pump circulating its new water within itself, I can remove the supply hose from the tank.
And now with the water running in the system, let's double check, see what our water level in the sump is like. Good. Water is passing through the wet-dry trickle filter as it's supposed to. 13 skimmer's doing what it's supposed to. Let's go out and kind of clean up our container out in the van. We'll come back in and check on the fish in just a moment. Okay. And there's the van with the container in it. And from the looks of it, we pumped at least 99 gallons out. So my mark on the tank is right on the spot. Well, let's go ahead and clean our hoses up.
With such a large and obvious water change, it's important to clean up afterwards. It's always been my goal to have been as invisible as possible and to leave with no signs of having been there. Cleaning up your own mess is as important as cleaning the tank.
Well, I did another test, and not that I was expecting any significant decrease. It is a little bit lower, 1.0, as opposed to the 2.0 it was before, but that just may be a temporary thing as the ammonia in the water kind of equalizes. But I'm feeling much better about at least making an attempt here to try to resolve it. It did not look as though the fish were that dramatically stressed out with the elevated ammonia levels, but as I said, I feel much better making an attempt, and I feel that I have lessened the toxicity of the ammonia in there, and that here within the next day or so, the biological filter should begin to swallow that up, and everything will be back to zero.
Well, don't get too comfortable there, Indiana. You may think you know what caused the ammonia spike, but you have yet to determine why there's no nitrite in the system yet.
So partly just as a little bit of a treat for the fish, because they've been on a diet for the last few days, but mostly just to make myself feel better, I put a little bit of flake food in the tank just to see if I could get the attention of the fish and if they were actually going to continue to feed. And it looks like they are. So again, I'm not overly concerned about the toxicity. I am worried about it. I would certainly hate to lose this entire tank load of fish. But so far, it's been a number of days with an elevated ammonia level, and I've not seen any real problems as a result of it. Not that I would encourage anyone to test it or try it out or try to make their aquarium work in a situation such as this, but in my case, I don't think I have a whole lot of choice other than keep my fingers crossed. I have done the 100-gallon water change in an attempt to dilute it. And at this point, I think it's really just more a case of time and tolerance on the fish's part.
I did get a reply back from CCAM, and it was quite interesting. They stated that most ammonia test kits cannot distinguish ammonia from the amine-based complex present in cupramine, and will therefore give a false high reading for ammonia while using cupramine. He suggested their ammonia alert and multi-test free and total ammonia test kits, which do not suffer from this problem, as they utilize a gas exchange technology that can distinguish ammonia from amines. Son of a gun. So apparently, I do not have an ammonia spike in the cylinder tank. That explains why there's no nitrite. It also adds another thing to that collective knowledge of being a fish guy. So, as a good little service person who's right on top of things, we've done just about all we can. I'll continue to follow up with these people, and as always, keep on moving forward.